We are still here at the Houghton Golf Club, where we are marking the 30th anniversary since the Springboks won that historic 1995 Rugby World Cup title. It was, of course, their first title, and they won it at a sold-out Ellis Park. And, of course, in terms of them beating the All Blacks, Joel Stransky will never forget in terms of that extra time drop goal and the images of the former statesman Nelson Mandela passing that Webb Ellis trophy to the then captain Francois Pienaar is something that will be etched in our memories forever. But of course, in terms of the Springbok emblem and what the brand represented at the time, it wasn't always that of unification. Before 1995, it was quite a divisive and, one emblem that really caused division in the country, which is why right now I've decided to rope in the Golden Lions Rugby Union president, and that is, of course, Neville, Jardine, to talk to us about how the Springboks brand has transitioned in the past 3 to 4 decades. Neville, thank you so much for making time for us and marking quite a historic occasion. Before we get into this all-important chat, where were you at the time when history was made?
I was actually at the stadium. I sat up high in the stands. I think it was only probably my first or second time at Ellis Park. I watched it with my late father, Bill Jardine, who was actually a national selector at the time. Yeah.
And of course, in terms of the Jardine family, have been really important in making sure that they bring, players of color into the team. But you also were a scrum half. You played, rugby. Talk to us about playing rugby at the time before, democracy.
Yeah, so I played for a club that was established in 1978 around over there, called Newtonians. So we played rugby, and many South Africans didn't know that people from the townships actually played rugby at the time. And so I played in Nuclear, area called Nuclear, and that's where we played. We played in situations like you see out here, no lights. We played in the dark, a few cars, shining onto the fields. But, it was an enjoyable, and we loved the rugby. Yeah.
No, absolutely. Yeah. And just some of the conversations that you would have with your father, Bill, and just what an important role he played in transitioning the brand of rugby, especially with the Springboks.
Yeah, look, it was a time in our country when the I think we came, it was a time of boycotts, a time of burnings, a time of chaos in our townships, and overnight we were told that all sports had to unify, basically, and it was a big problem to a lot of young people, because in the old days we were taught to boycott, and until South Africa became a normalized democracy, so we wouldn't go to sports arenas like Ellis Park and those kind of places before that, and it was a troubling time for all of us. Yeah.
It really was, and especially how difficult that decision must have been to have the likes of Chester Williams, to be a part of that historic squad.
Yeah, it was, we were fortunate that we had almost a seat at the table. Because as I mentioned, my late dad Bill was a national selector, and we couldn't understand how we could have the Rugby World Cup in our country when things weren't normalized, and particularly because there was no black person in the team. And he was under enormous pressure at the time, and fortunately one player got injured, and Chester was catapulted into the team, and the rest is history. So we won the World Cup. There was also calls for the Springbok to be removed, if you remember. As you mentioned, it was a very divisive period in our history, and we all had problems with that. And Madiba had the foresight and the vision to make everybody understand that the Springbok had to remain as the national symbol for rugby. And I guess he could see that the unity it would bring. And today we're proud to say that even though the Springbok was so divisive those years, it has brought so much unity and joy to everybody in South Africa today.
We will always celebrate that moment, of course, in terms of Chester Williams, but how difficult was it? Because I think a lot of people don't understand really the sense of how difficult it must have been to have that first black Springbok in the team.
Yeah, it was very difficult, and I think our society is still split on what happened 30 years ago, where people regarded even Madiba, my late father, as people that almost sold out at the time, and. But the one thing that he consoled us with was that we had to look at the bigger picture. We were bringing a country together, and we had to let these small petty squabbles in our mind, I mean, which we were bringing to him, and they were saying to us that, come on guys, we're unifying the country, and this is a small sacrifice we have to make. And what a wonderful sacrifice that we made at the time. And you know we can look back and say that yes, it was probably the correct decision. Yeah.
It was a moment that a lot of people just had goosebumps. You know, Nelson Mandela's name was being chanted in the stadium, even though there were some boos that were coming around. But, you know, just in terms of him handing over that trophy to Francois.
Yeah, look, that was a moment where I think I also probably, came to my senses as a young activist at the time, where we all had to sit back and say, yes, this is the correct thing for the country. Because people who couldn't even watch rugby, I mean, even today, lots of our young people in the townships can't even watch the sport, live. They'll watch delayed recordings of it and so on. But they also embrace the Springbok as a South African, and it also brings joy to them. They also want to play for the Springboks, boys and girls, women and men and everybody. Yeah.
So then what do you say about the brand of the Springboks now? You know, so many years later, 4 Rugby World Cup titles, and what it just represents in terms of South Africa, and how can we get, more children from the rural areas, from the townships, playing at the highest level?
Yeah, look, I mean, the brand is amazing. I mean, it's recognizable throughout the world. I think it's one of the most, the opposition, one of the most feared brands, basically, if you're going to play against the Springboks. Because not only are you going to play against the team, you're going to play against our country. Everybody rallies behind them, and it's just amazing for all of us. But the work is not completed yet. We need to make sure that, as you say, we need to go into the townships, we need to go into the villages and give these people an opportunity, give our children an opportunity so that they can compete in a fair and equitable system, so, and that's what we're trying to do at the Lions as well with the corporates, to make sure that our youth, get an equal opportunity, because I tell you, there are so many Springboks who's lying in waiting, and I think we can probably, as Russ is already doing, he's got 54 people in his squad. We can probably have 100 Springbok teams in this country.
Couldn't have said it better. Thank you so much, Neville Jardine, who's, of course, the Golden Lions Rugby Union president, talking to us about how the brand of the Springboks has transitioned in the past 30 years and really has been now an emblem of unifying the country. We will continue to mark this momentous occasion, 30 years since the Springboks won the 1995 Rugby World Cup title, a moment that none of us will ever forget.